Yeah, cheers. That's not a Corona, is it?
It is a fake Corona, also known as a Miller High Life.
Oh, that's much better.
Gross.
Ew.
I bought a case of Corona because I feel for that poor brewery and the ridiculousness of that people are not buying it at all because of its
I
name.
know.
Are they really not buying it? I thought they'd like have like a viral marketing campaign almost out of this. No pun intended.
That's what I thought too, but then like the last day that I went out, like the store was just like displaying it, like get it out of here.
Please. Well, I'm back home with my parents. I fled New York as soon as I got laid off because of the pandemic, and then
Were you in the city down there?
Yeah, I was in Brooklyn, in like
that
the
sucks.
Bushwick area. Yeah.
I'm up in the Hudson Valley, so
Scott, they laid you off though?
Yeah, they said I'd have a job if, they survive and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, once that happened, there was nothing really keeping me there.
no, film industry is just like totally stopped.
Yeah, it's crazy. All production halted everywhere, like nothing shooting. So yeah, they're just struggling to stay afloat right now. So
Yeah.
tough times.
And if this goes, long time, it's going to be a lot of us, a lot of your friends, doesn't matter what industry you're in, you can't really survive if money's not coming in. And, the church even had a meeting about that, because how can you expect people to like roll out pledges when, as already evidenced by one of us here, like you just don't know when we might be terminated. And I think it's so hard on so many fronts. There's the emotional toil, the fact that we're all probably indoors, like now what do you do with yourself? There's the uncertainty of how long this lasts, and that's not even taking into account, are you sick? Are people that you know sick? Like, every time you go out, you have a fear of getting sick. It's a lot. But what about other people? Like, where are you guys, to answer Liza's question and like, what's going on in your situation?
I'm in Salt Lake. Like I can go out my front door and I'm 15 minutes away from a hike where I won't see a human for 2 hours. Which is one of the interesting parts about being isolated, is I'm already such a not introverted, but I enjoy my solo time.
Totally.
Where now it's that's all the time.
Morgan, what about you, seeing that you were last time I talked to you, you were working at a hospital on genetics. I mean, this seems like you should be our expert.
Yeah, so I am living at home currently, and I work down at Penn in neurogenetics.
Within your field, have they talked at all about people in certain genetic predispositions being a little bit more prone to this than others?
There are genetic factors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely. Especially for diabetes. Heart disease, lung disorders, a lot of those are related to COVID and an increased susceptibility, I guess would be the right word. However, we do work with a lot of the older generations of people. So a lot of our patients are in their 60s and 70s. So for that reason, we're going to have to suspend actual appointments for quite a while, but it's going to be really interesting trying to have these phone calls with individuals in their 70s and doing counseling over the phone. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of see what happens in the next few weeks here. It's crazy. The hospital was crazy. Even before we were officially told we couldn't go into work, people were canceling appointments. People weren't showing up for appointments for a long time.
I canceled my colonoscopy. I'm not having anything done that way.
Easy decision to make, Brian.
Any excuse you can get, right?
Darn it.
All right, what about you, Lizzie, Liza, or Ian?
I'm still in Philly, but I.
Oof.
You have that Maggie over there.
I don't know
That
if my
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi is working.
Oh no.
Is it on?
She's frozen.
Oh man, that's an unfortunate case to be frozen on
We got a fallen soldier.
Liza, let's jump to you.
I'm in Arlington. Oh, she's back. You want to go?
Am I back?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. The downsides of being at my parents' house, I guess. But yeah, it's been a bit of a strain. I think, just generally. But one of my roommates is sick, maybe. I think it's just a cold, but we're being kind of cautious. So I'm here, and like all of my work is remote, which is also difficult because I work at a gallery, so the kind of in-person visual aspect is really important to the work. So it's been a challenge, but kind of trying to reinvent the ways that we interact with our audience. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'm like cautiously optimistic. I'm lucky to still have my job and that my employer is committed to, you know, paying my salary through this time, kind of no matter what happens. It's really lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just insane to me how we went. I mean, if you were paying attention, you could see where potentially we were going to go with this. But how we went from like a month ago, you know, my wife and I were out like having hibachi to right now we're like, I've been targeting my shopping dates to stock up on like things that could last potentially for months so that my son has food to eat if, God forbid, I can't go out of the house or there's nothing in the shelves. It's just, it's mind blowing. And I don't think any of us were prepared for that because no one in our lifetime has lived through this realistically. And I think we have so many interesting personas just around the room of different people in different fields, literally spread across the country, that people in the church were like, oh my God, you're gonna get like 20-year-olds that get together and talk about this? I would love to hear their perspective of one, employment, two, fear, like Ian being on like the agricultural front, like Morgan working in a hospital, you know, Scott, with what just happened to you, being in New York City, which right now is like the epicenter of what's going on, you know, Darren being out on the West Coast. I think it'd be an interesting thing to, one, discuss briefly. If you have a fear, like what is it? And if you have something that you think could be good through all of this, like if there's a positive somewhere at the end of this year, at the end of several months, what could be something that could be like, man, this was almost not worth it, but since we went through it, this is the good that we can draw from it.
Can I run with that for a second?
You go first. Yeah, we'll go around and we'll interact too.
I mean, we tend to look at everything from the farming and agricultural perspective, and from my last job, you're like, I'm tied into a lot of like Department of Labor and USDA stuff, just about where the labor force come from. We work with a lot of Mexicans, a lot of Jamaicans. All non-temporary visas were pretty much suspended, but then they were like, holy shit, we have like 300,000 people that come in this country to feed everyone, and that's just the ones that come in legally. Like, well, what are we going to do when those people don't come in? So there was this whole like shit show of trying to transfer work visas from people that were already in the country so that they don't go back, so they can stay in the country. But even then, there's still going to be a massive labor shortage, at least as of right now, until they find a way to get people across the borders. And even then, a lot of the labor camps have, you know, 30 guys living in a house that's meant for like 15 or 20. So, you know, it's not necessarily up to code or, you know, pandemic standards.
Do we have to worry, Ian, like about food shortages if this goes on?
No, I mean, they'll find a way to make the labor happen. It won't help with, I think, their goals for, you know, slowing the spread. I think they'll find a way to make it happen because they kind of have to. Otherwise, like, farmers have to be applying for disaster relief, and then it's just like they work. I mean, you know, it's kind of hard to know. There's a lot of optimism coming from the small farms community. It's a better cry than ever for, hey, support local farmers and help develop like a more secure regional food system instead of having everything that's grown in certain spots and then shipped to the sides of the country.
What about some others?
I mean, so I work for a nonprofit, like an environmental conservation nonprofit, and we're based off of like a membership donation, like, and we have like a lot of really high dollar donors and things like that. But then like if we lost a lot of government funding and things like that, then I could see it affecting us. But fortunately, at least, I think there's still like a large amount of people and a growing maybe number of people that understand that like conservation isn't going away. And I think in a kind of odd way, I think that this is maybe going to be like work in our favor a little bit, because you see those like maps and things about how like pollution is changing and things like that, and like that kind of works in our favor because they see that like the work that we do is like could be like there's things you can do that can actually fix it. So I think in some ways it's actually interesting because I think it's bringing to light a lot of things like how much the earth kind of like needs a little bit of a break. So it's interesting to see it in that light too. But
it's such a good point. I mean, they showed today, like in India, like people who could breathe air for the first time without like the smog being like completely around them. And then, you know, there's a map that was released to the United States of just like how less of
there was a crazy one in from China when they first, like 2 weeks or a week after they did that like entire kind of shelter in place or whatever people are calling it,
the air pollution.
So I think kind of in that regard it's actually interesting working for a environmental group because people are starting to realize that there's actually a way bigger problem when a lot of people just kind of like turn a blind eye to it. But I think in this way you kind of can't when you're seeing like
if we can make this sacrifice, couldn't we do more for climate change, which won't just go away next year? Right.
So I don't know, I think it'll be interesting.
It's going to be interesting on my front. It's going to completely change the field of healthcare and the way we treat patients, not only because of how unprepared, I guess, we were for this entire situation, and now we're trying to catch up to it on the back end, and it's a mess, obviously. And then just the way we treat patients moving forward and how much more telemedicine is now going to be incorporated, because for the next few months, it's going to become the standard. It's going to become the only thing available to everyone that doesn't absolutely need to be in the hospital. So all outpatient stuff, they're going to start to move towards telemedicine. And then once the physicians and providers all get comfortable with it, it's going to become so much more standard in the future. So they're going to start, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens with that. A lot more opportunities to stay at home and call your doctor and not actually have to go in to an appointment. It's kind of going to be where the field really starts to trend, and that's where it was going, but now it's being forced. So it's not really an option. If you want to talk to your doctors right now, this is the only way to do it.
Well, and the other thing too, right, with the bed shortages, and it's one putting a real like magnifying glass to if something like this were to happen, how critical like our just shortage of open spaces within hospitals. But then of course you have the whole debate that's been raging in politics, of course, like Medicare for all. Afford this, and shouldn't we have healthcare available to people when we are literally in a crisis, plus when your health can directly affect other people's health? You know, like if you don't have healthcare and you're walking around sick, well, it doesn't really matter if I have healthcare. You're making me sick.
Well, and it's so much deeper just than like whether you can pay to go to a doctor, but also like, has that been something that has been encouraged in your social environment from day one? I mean, that's only true of people who have always had access to healthcare. So I mean, it's so much broader just than that question. But yeah, I mean, there are massive. It's hard to kind of look out into the world and see what's going on and not, you know, draw some conclusions, or at least consider the kind of broader political, social, you know, impacts.
It's having a very widespread psychological impact too, and I don't think that's necessarily being recognized to the level that it should. It's causing so much anxiety and stress and all of these other depression. People aren't outside, people aren't interacting, and people rely on that kind of social interaction just as a way of life for a lot
and just getting out of the house. I mean, simply we're pretty fortunate. We live backed up to a huge section of protected woodlands. So like we can walk outside. I mean, kind of similar to Darren, but right now, I mean, if you're in a city or in any populated area, it's like all of a sudden everyone's agoraphobes. You know, because you go outside, you're around people, and now everything you're being told is, hey, be afraid of people. So, yeah.
Right.
And I mean, this is week 1, right? Or like week 1.5, depending, or 2, depending on how long you've been paying attention to this. So like, can you imagine this going month to month to month, just how much that's going to mess with people's psyche? And, you know, it's interesting that from a parental point of view, from a parent who's a 4-year-old, right? My big fear, besides so many others, but one of mine in terms of parenting Seth is, how do I not, if this drags on, create an agoraphobic kid where basically right now, every time we're out, it's, no, like that, like go to the other side of the street. We can't go near him. Like, Seth, we're going to run in and grab like 1 or 2 supplies and like back out. Seth, you can't see your friends because they might, like, do you tell them that they're sick? Seth, why can't you go to the playground? Because he's constantly asking, Daddy, why can't we go to the swings? Like, why can't we go? There's no one there. It's like, because you might get sick. Like, there's no great way to say it. And then we've tried to kind of soft, like, walk him to it, the realization that there's this real danger out there. But how do you do that with a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old and not raise this kid that's going to be all of a sudden just got this complex that I don't know how to trust strangers, neighbors, because maybe for months or longer, they're like afraid of society.
Yeah, I mean, like, just going off of that, like, I feel like I was talking with my parents about their family members telling them about the Great Depression and how like that like had this lasting psychological effect on people, with like how people would ration things and be like very anxious in general. And I can totally see that coming through. And like, I don't know how you raise the kid to not grow up to be agoraphobic like that. I mean, I guess like technology like this is helpful, but like at such an impressionable age, I don't know. But also like one good thing I do hope comes out of this on top of Liza's point is like, I feel like this could be the place to get some momentum for like real like environmental change. And like, I mean, like, I think the Green New Deal is a great idea. Like, if all these people are out of work, put them to work in this new sector that should be invested in anyway, you know, like I really hope that gets some momentum as a result of this. But yeah, I don't know how it's going to change like the entertainment industry. Like, that's something I'm kind of worried about. Like, I don't know when it's going to be safe for people to go back to production, or like how many people are just going to be able to like make it through this. Cause like I'm lucky enough to be able to like retreat back here and just kind of like mooch off my parents a little more. But like a lot of people can't, and it's like a gig economy. Like, you live show to show, like it's like a day by day, week to week sort of thing. So like if this stuff is really drying up, yeah, it could leave a lot of people in a really bad spot.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll just reflect really poorly on Trump, and that'll be good. That gets us out of this.
If that is one thing, then that happens. I'm also thinking from like Morgan's point about like a psychological perspective. I talked to some of the younger kids. This is week 1.5, and already they can't stand the sight of their phone. And so like maybe like another effect would be 6 months from now, it's like, I don't want to see a phone ever again. Like, just get me outside and like play. And so in some sense, maybe this is what recognizes or wakes people up to say there's life that exists beyond this, because now we all hate it. It's like PTSD. Like, let's do something else with our lives. Maybe that could be something else that could be good that pulls out.
Well, I think also, like, not to bring it back to the politics, we don't have to talk about just politics, but like the entire, like, you're kind of talking about mindset, you know, like a mindset of a generation being more, you know, involved or less involved in their phones, but also like this idea of like a social consciousness. So our actions immediately affect other people's lives, which I think is something that we're hearing more and more, especially as it relates to the coronavirus. Like if you're out, you have the potential to spread it. And I think that in the United States, we don't, like the national consciousness is not one of considering the group or considering how it is that we impact each other. It's more about like, what can I do for myself, or what can I do for my, immediate family, or like, how do I better my life, or how do I make more money for myself so that I can then do this, as opposed to like what it is that I'm doing now is going to have like this ripple effect across my, community or my city or my entire country. So, I mean, it goes into what Scott and Liza were talking about with, these environmental programs. Like, it's important for all of us to think about, like what it is that we're doing in a way that highlights that collective action can be very powerful in sustaining something like the environment or workforce or like whatever it is. I think that's just something like we're hearing. I mean, people are tossing around the word selfish, and it's not you, it's us or whatever. And I think that is something that I'm hearing more and more now that is really powerful, that I haven't heard basically my entire life, like in such a kind of distilled way.
Totally. I mean, watching those spring breakers in Florida, like,
oh my God,
drove me nuts. And I mean, you guys aren't even that removed from that age group.
Well,
right?
I think that's what makes it worse, because all of us are like put into that pool sometimes, and we're like,
don't come for millennials, it's Gen Z you're looking for or whatever.
Yeah.
One of my buddies from high school was on the beach in Florida, and I'm looking at his Snapchat story, like, what?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Again, like, I hope it's a wake-up call. Like, I hope it's because I feel like there's the extremes of capitalism and communism, but like community isn't communism. Like you can live your best life, and you can like look out for yourself and like buy the sunglasses that make you look cool, but like it's still a collective effort. It's still and I think like what interests me most, not interest, that's not the great term, but like what fascinates me most about the situation is that like while society is put on hold, like the world isn't going to stop. Like we're still going to have hurricanes, we're still going to have natural disasters. Like I'm anxiously awaiting the crossover. What happens when we have a pandemic and a Katrina? Like,
yeah,
is that?
Well, and a lot of times those things feed each other, right? Like in the world
100%.
that happens.
Yeah. Well, wasn't there an earthquake a couple days ago in Salt Lake? Did you feel that? What happened?
I felt an aftershock yesterday. We're still getting ripples. Like all of a sudden the house is just wobbling. But this was 20 miles from me. Like the epicenter was 20 miles from me. And it was a 5.7. Like it was strong.
And that's what you have to pray for. I mean, for this not to happen, if something like this were to happen, 2-3 events this year, when we're already talking about $1.something trillion, like, deals, like where are we going to get the money to rebuild? And so, I mean, the scary thing, to your point, Darren, you're so right. There's capitalism, communism, but there's socialism in this country. For one, there's social, fabrics that we put in place to help protect, the elderly, to help, just make our general life go along on its way. But we have socialism for the rich, all the time. Right. When companies fail, what are they trying to do?
Yeah, they get bailed out.
Yeah, here's your handout. But we can't look after like our daily day-to-day people. It drives me nuts that that's always labeled socialism, but the rest of it is socialism, but for rich people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then we just call it capitalism.
Well, I mean, we live in interesting times, and I'm trying to stay positive, and I'm trying to think of, the good that can come out of this. And I think we've already talked about some of those good things that can happen from a social perspective, as well as like from a global perspective, if we all finally take this stuff seriously. And Lizzie, I think your point is so on the nose. It's perfect about this country has been dripping in arrogance, me, mentality for so long, that hopefully this wakens us up to, we are all somehow in this together. And you know who's an essential worker, an essential part of this community? Your delivery guy. The person who works behind the register at Trader Joe's. Like, all these people that we basically have discarded or discharged from society. Hopefully we start remembering that the only way this works is by depending upon those people too, and teachers and nurses, so maybe fair wages in the future, because look at what happens when, as a parent, when you don't longer having a teacher watch after your kid. This is driving my wife and I nuts right now, because he's with us, he's wonderful. But imagine having 2 or 3 kids. It's like, now all of a sudden you're homeschooling, you're trying to do your job, and you don't have the teacher there with their lesson plans that they're gifted in, and you're trying to, like, say, Seth, S-E-T-H. What does that sound like? Seth. It's like, that's not my skill set to teach him how to spell and say words. Like, I want another teacher to do that.
Or if you're a single mother, like,
oh yeah,
you're trying to work from home, and you've, like, your 3 kids that normally go to daycare are now, like, running around screaming at each other. Like, and like,
well, and how, like, all of the people who already are not being paid a living wage, but are supporting households, and now can't even make that money because they've been laid off from that job that was paying them, whatever it was. Philadelphia has, like, a massive sort of intergenerational poverty problem. I think, maybe even the majority of people that live in, the Commonwealth of Philadelphia are below the poverty line. And, like, this is not, it's not helping.
I think a part of it too is, like, socially and, like, economically, we celebrate entrepreneurship more than we do, like, sustainability. Like, we're more about the guy that comes up with the new idea than the guy that can prolong the old good ideas. Like, I think it's true in every facet. Like, scientifically, like, scientists get paid so much less to do fact checking on previous findings and experiments than they do to put out something new. So you're constantly being fed, like, oh, does chocolate make your kid healthier? Like, we get those articles instead of the people that are like, there's no money in redoing science. So it's like, generally, we just favor the new thing over what could be better in the long term. And then something like this happens, and it's like, it's a call to action. It's like, okay, now we actually need to care about that baggage claim. There's, like, the guy bagging your groceries at Trader Joe's, because, like, he is just as much a part of our society as Richard Branson, or, like, these guys that are flying around the world on their private jets. Like,
And his health matters.
right.
Mm-hmm.
He may not have Instagram followers.
Back a little bit, though.
All right, Scott, what are you gonna say?
I'm just gonna push back a little bit, because, like, I hear what you're saying, but I think a lot of those entrepreneurs and, like, the new ideas are getting stomped out as a result of this. It's like the people who don't have just, like, a ton of capital lying around to weather the storm. Like, Apple's gonna be fine, Johnson & Johnson's gonna be fine, like, InBev's gonna be fine, like, all these huge corporations are gonna be fine. But it's really, like, the small businesses are getting screwed by this because they can't weather the storm. So, like, like, I'm trying to be optimistic, but I really kind of think, like, this is going to deepen inequality in this country.
Aren't there, like, also, like, just 5 major companies that control, like, our food chain, so
Monsanto,
something like that, right? Like, Nestle is, like, all over it, and
oh my god.
Yeah. I used to know that a lot better. I don't now. Buying all those products anyway, so you just don't. But it's a lot of the processed food, I think, is owned by 2 or 3 people, or large companies. Really, it's mostly in terms of like the agrochemical production and the processed foods production. Like, everyone that's growing 3,000 acres of corn, wheat, and soy sells it to the people, down the road in the Midwest who have some big processed food plants, or like the big pork packing houses are all owned by, I think, like one conglomerate.
Blue.
At one point I dived into a lot of that, but then it was like, well, the best thing I can do is just stop buying a lot of these products. So,
Yeah.
but you still kind of have to sometimes, because that's just, we still buy shit at the grocery store when we want to make cookies. It's like, we got Bob's Red Mill, but
So how do we get through this?
start a garden.
So but what if I have like no grass? Like
Yeah.
I'm not allowed out with other people. Like, how am I supposed to start a garden now? Like, I totally get that idea. Like, figure out how to do that stuff so you don't have to be dependent upon others to bring you food.
I don't know, get some houseplants. These are completely not solutions.
I think right now it's like the small stuff, even the like, I mean, it's all over social media, but like support your local business or support your local restaurant by buying a gift card, or like reach out to them. And like, I have a friend who is out in California who used to like manage or work with a lot of bars and restaurants in the area, and some of them are like posting the Venmos of their bartenders on their Instagram or whatever. So it's like, when you pour yourself a drink at home, like tip your bartender, or whatever, like the small stuff like that, whatever we can do. It's like tiny, but whatever we can do to kind of help those people keep on keeping on. And it's also kind of like, again, building that sort of community spirit, because we're not going to be able to get through it by ourselves.
Going after that, like, find a local farm to support. Farmers are still going to be farming food, and then you don't have to go to a grocery store and like deal with people freaking out. A lot of farmers are trying to navigate the whole like, how do we do safe, healthy, contact-free distribution?
Right.
There are a lot of good vegetable farmers that have CSAs around Philly, so there's plenty of options. You can support somebody who was already doing.
And some of them do deliveries too, like that's already built into their program.
Yeah.
So if you, like, keeping with the original intent of what this was, granted, none of us have advice even probably for our own age group at this point in time, or ourselves, but if you had to like even try to think of what would your teenage self be going through during this particular time. Think about, you're probably out of your high school right now, you're home, you're not
Can't go
seeing
to prom.
friends. Like,
living at home right now is it's very easy for me to access that teenage Liz mindset, believe me.
All right, so good. So like dive back in, and like, what would you want to say to not just like your teenage self, but like the teenagers out there, now, right, and it's like, who are contemplating big issues in the sense of, what does this mean for my parents' job if they're thinking about that, or will the world as I know it still be there, or even like, I'm not going to be able to see my friends, I'm not going to be able to graduate, not going to be able to go to prom, I won't see my boyfriend or girlfriend for X amount of time. Like, is there any advice that you can give with your little bit of worldliness that you do have more than they do, that you can give to them if they were here listening?
I have one. I mean, it's not so much about like Corona, but like just in general. Like I feel like don't stress out about like trying to find a career. Like, don't try and be like, what's my job? Just try and like build skills. Like, if you're developing skills that you're passionate about and get really good at those, like, you'll find a career out of that. Like, you don't have to just pick like a job description. Just like start getting good at stuff.
And this is the time to do that, right, Scott? Like, I've been trying to talk to the teenagers about if there's anything positive, and I know it's so hard to think about that now, but all of a sudden they've been thrust into, you have all this time in the world. Your recitals aren't happening, your practices aren't happening, you've got all this time. Now, a lot of them aren't programmed to know what to do at that time, because unfortunately they've been so over-programmed that like free time is like, what do I do with this? But I've been trying to say, like, what is that thing that you've wanted to do but you never had time to do that you can try to be better at? Writing, or Ian, maybe going out into a garden, planting, or in Darren's case, putting a rap together and putting it on YouTube, or like learning a new instrument or something. Like, is there something that you can do, to your point, Scott, that's going to make you feel, this is what I like? It might not be what people are pushing me towards in terms of career, but this is what I like. This almost seems like the prime time to try working on that, because you have all the time, right?
Agreed. I think we might also see just like a mini kind of creative renaissance come out of this, like in terms of finding a silver lining. I mean, Coldplay started doing this, Neil Young started doing this, a couple other people started doing this where they're putting on concerts on like Instagram Live from their bedroom.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be kind of a ripple effect. It'll be, this is how we've done things for so long creatively. Here's a new landscape. How do we adapt? How do we, on top of the fact that people that would otherwise have less free time to focus on those things are now given an opportunity to direct more time towards them.
The church is going through that now. We've always just opened our doors on Sunday and people come in, a plate goes around, we collect the offering, and we obviously do a lot more than that, but now we have to think outside the box on how do we still be pastoral to people who are now really isolated? How do we reach people who want to feel like there's hope in this world when everything around you feels like it's completely hopeless? And you're right, we're being forced to think in a new way, and I bet every industry almost is at this point.
Right.
And it's interesting because we talk about like the whole isolation thing and being whatever, and especially focused on like the youth and kids in high school and how they're dealing with it. But then it's like my grandparents too. I tried to FaceTime my grandmother yesterday. It was a half an hour ordeal where we had to go through how to charge your iPad first and then answer a FaceTime call. But still, it was like the best probably hour that she's had in a week, because she was like, I can't do anything. I can't leave the house. I can't go anywhere. She's like, I just want to go out and like walk through the food stores and see that everything's gone. She's like, I don't care that there's nothing on the shelves. I want to go see that there's nothing on the shelves. So like, she's going crazy.
That's something else. Like, how do we reach that group and let them know that they're not forgotten when literally they're not a part of this technological landscape, which is keeping us somehow tethered to each other? It's a big problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this could be like a good opportunity to just write some old-fashioned letters. And
I was just about to say that. Yeah, like I'm just like, write a damn letter. Like, you know, we've had the ability to do that for a long time.
Just don't cough on it.
What?
Don't cough on it. Like, don't.
Oh yeah, I won't. I'll spray it with disinfectant before I send it in the mail. But you know, it kind of makes you like, we're all searching for these resources, and a lot of them I think are probably newer and, you know, related to technology because it allows us to do a lot of amazing things. But I think it is also a push, like Ian was saying, you know, he can go outside and go for a walk in the woods, and Darren's doing the same thing, and it's, you know, we sort of have to resort to some pastimes that, you know, we've maybe kind of pushed aside for a long time.
Yeah, I would say something you said sparked this thought, but for the younger generation that have all this free time, it's like, take some time to explore yourself. You know, it's like you never get that really when you're that age and you're just constantly being inundated with shit to do.
Right.
That was an article I just read. You know, I know all of you know me pretty well, and my big push, you know, a lot of the times is like, boredom is a good thing, you know, and you know, because it allows you to kind of say, well, how am I going to conquer that? And you know, if you have this, you know, today, it's so easy to conquer your boredom with things that do not really enhance your sense of self or your sense of creativity. And so if you are tired of this, and I think that will be the case, like, this is an opportunity to not just find who you are and what you like and what are your passions, but how do you follow through with that? Now, we're limited in a bit because your parents, if you're a teenager, your parents are probably not going to say, go take your camera and walk the streets and take some photos of people in the city. Now, you probably are limited to your house and your limited surrounding, but you at least can write, or we have computers where you can make music and program beats, or do lots of different things. And it's going to take some creativity to do that when you're stuck in a little bubble. But I'm hoping nonetheless that it's going to help us to try popping that bubble somewhat when we do emerge out of it. I'm hoping people hit like the escape hatch running and they're like, I'm out of this life. I want something new, because this was just so claustrophobic, and it makes them realize how claustrophobic their life was before. That's at least what I'm praying for. But
yeah, it's kind of like when parents make their kids smoke the whole pack of cigarettes. It's Like,
Parents let their kids do that.
you wanted to be alone with your phone. Let's see how much you really want that.
Yeah.
Is that what Dr. Drew did to you?
Let's see how interesting Instagram is. Are you kidding me? Dr. Drew just like showed me pictures of black lung. Come on now.
Yeah, that was enough.
I've been on email chains with Dr. Drew lately that
Yeah, he's blowing it up because
I've been getting all of those emails from like multiple different people in my family have been forwarding them to me on like his thoughts on it, which are honestly pretty interesting. But I've been cracking up that Drew Ball's been filling up my inbox.
Yeah, I've actually been
I've been
pretty impressed with. He's been super tuned in with.
Yeah.
This guy patched you up in Belize. You listen to what he says.
Yeah, I'm feeling kind of left out that I don't get the down low from Dr. Drew.
He sends it to all his paddle buddies because those are like all his friends, and like tells them to not be dumb and like wash your hands.
Yeah, the last one at the bottom, it was like, and another thing, I think the people buying all the toilet paper is dumb or something like that.
Yep. Accurate.
I'll forward it on to you guys too.
Because he has this urgent care business, so he's been trying to figure out how to do this. So they've been making a lot of changes. Like they have people waiting in their cars instead of in a waiting room. Some people actually being treated in their cars. They were getting to a point where they were running out of masks because people were buying too many masks for themselves and like stocking up. And like, I mean, the CDC or the World Health, one of them had to set up an entire webpage dedicated to the false information that was being spread. So that's his whole thing is like, if we're informed and intelligent in the next month, we can make the next 6 months infinitely better in terms of casualties, in terms of, you know, economic damage, in terms of like all those things. If we can do smart things now, we're saving ourselves down the road, which is why he's been so on top of like, we just do these, if we take social distancing seriously, if we're washing our hands frequently, if we're not, you know, going to large groups and stuff like that, if we actually devote ourselves to focusing on these things, we can make a huge impact down the road. Which is like, go back to that whole us being grouped in is like, oh, the millennials don't think it's their problem. Like it's obviously not everybody, but it is a large portion of people that are still like, there's kids in southern Germany that are going out and coughing in old people's faces and they're calling it like Corona parties and they're trying to be like counterculture. Like there's like a rebel culture around this that if that doesn't get tackled, I mean, the first Corona case confirmed in China was December. Like we're almost in April. Like it was out of the country. It was in South Korea by January. Like we had 2 months of a president saying, oh, it's just like, it's not as bad as the flu. And then all of a sudden, like, I think the reason why the craze is so crazy is because we're doing what we should have done in 3 months over the course of a week.
100%. Quite frankly, I was on these sites that were kind of showing what was happening in Italy and Spain, and it was scary enough if you were paying attention to realize there's no reason why it can't come here. And I think, again, that speaks to that American arrogance of like, right, that's everyone else, but not us, right? And so like Anya thought it was nuts. Like when I started like putting like pasta, like extra pasta and like things in the pantry, she's like, it's not gonna get that bad, really? And then you're right, Darren. I think, and this is so sad, but when the NBA canceled their season, it was like everyone was like, maybe this is real. It's like, we didn't need LeBron James to like not be on the court to figure out that this is real. And yet that's because we have a void in leadership that we needed the NBA to cancel their season to basically get people to run out to Wegmans. And
but like the sad thing is we did.
I know.
LeBron James 2020.
It was Rudy Gobert. It was right down the street in Salt Lake.
Hey, talking on the microphone. He's the one. Yeah.
That was insane. I couldn't.
That was wild.
That was like baffling. And obviously, like it's not like, oh, he started like he was getting a lot of unwarranted hate, but like that's the mentality you have to overcome.
Yeah.
And then you have brilliant people that know what they're talking about, that their word is not being heard. Because that's my, like, the biggest issue is social media gave everybody a voice, and this is a time where like 0.1% of people's voice matters. Like you know nothing. Like I know nothing. We know nothing. Like
A lot of noise.
like there's just so much noise. There's so many people that are actively saying this or that, and it's not even whether they're right or wrong. It's just that they're not coming from a standpoint where we should even be listening to them.
It's like that Dave Chappelle skit. I think it was about like after 9/11 or whatever. He was like, "Where's Ja Rule on this?
Where's Ja?
Let's get Ja Rule. Let us know what to do." It's like we don't need Ja Rule to figure this stuff out.
Right. We put such an importance in these famous people's Instagrams that we like. What do you mean Khloe Kardashian doesn't telling me what to do in the quarantine? Like,
Yeah, right.
Oh, man.
Guys, I got to run to feed Seth, but this has been reality strikes. This has been great to see all of you and to have like a real conversation. But also, I know this is going to sound a little sappy, but it really kind of warms me to, even if it's just 6 of you, within your generation that kind of really understand the reality that we're in, that are not the spring breakers down on the Florida beaches. I think this is important for people to realize that all young people are not just so me-centered, but really worried, really like thinking about this maturely. And how do we get through this, as Lizzie and lots of you have said, like as a community? I think, unfortunately, we've only reserved that for older people think that way, and that's not true. And I knew that wasn't going to be true for you guys, but it's just nice to have that validated in one space during like an 1:10 Zoom session. So I really appreciate your time. And I think we should do this again. If you guys are up for it, I think I certainly have the time to do it. And we could do other issues or keep just being like our supports through this one. But it's just awesome to see you all in one space and to hear all of your wisdom being put out. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you. Yes, great.
It's
I
funny,
can't do
it's
that, I
funny
think.
that you just said that, because I saw a meme on Instagram that was like, I used to be like, oh, I gotta run, like, got things to do, but now like no one has anything to do. So you're like,
why aren't you answering my calls?
yeah, like,
I know where you are.
yeah, you can't be like, oh, I gotta run. I got stuff to do today. Like,
You're literally at home. Like pick up.
I can hear the microwave running in the background.